A little later on, I saw that this dude, this Hispanic guy, he like launched an NFT, like tried to sell an NFT, and then realized that like everything in that video was copyright. Like the skateboard, the cranberry juice, the song, like yeah, it was rough. He ended up selling it like the NFT of like just his face or something. And so Thomas, I want to ask you a question, or I want to talk about a theme that I've been seeing a lot recently, or I mean, pretty much since I started working in marketing, I've been seeing a consistent theme of owning your audience. And the phrase that I've been seeing a lot is own your audience, own your business. Or, you know, own your audience, own your revenue streams, own your audience, own your money. But there's like a common theme around this construct, or this theme of owning your audience. And I mean, I guess I want to just like open the floor to you for like an open discussion, just ask you kind of what you think about that theme. Like, go ahead.
So I have several thoughts on this theme. So for one, it's super important. Everybody should be aware about this. But first, let's ask what does it actually mean? So the where this comes from is the basic fact that in the digital economy, in the creator economy, a lot what happens is you have these big services that act as aggregators. If you are not familiar and if you care about this kind of stuff, then read Ben Thompson. He has developed a very in-depth understanding of all this. He calls it aggregation theory. He has many posts about this. But the basic principle is these big platforms became really good at aggregating users at huge scale, and then getting suppliers on their platform who don't own, in most cases, the relationship to the end customer. That is controlled by the platform, and they become just suppliers on the platform, and therefore they are highly dependent on the platform. And that is true whether you're in e-commerce selling on Amazon, or whether you're creating videos on YouTube. You're subject to the platform's terms. Of course, you're also privy to the large user base and audience that these platforms can move. So it's a bit, there are pros and cons. It's a trade-off. But one clear fact is that as long as you don't own, quote unquote own, I should say, your audience, you will definitely have the issue that you are highly dependent. The technical term for this is platform risk, that you have to a high extent. And then I believe countering this and building something that you own, that is independent, is really valuable and something everybody should do. And this can take different shapes or form, right? The easiest way is like build an email list where you have the email addresses of your customers, of your fans, of your audience. A different model that you can take, and a different path that you can choose, is that you instead build a platform like what we do with LT Fan Platform, where you have a lot more customer data, which of course opens more gateways to different business models on top. So
I mean, it's kind of it's sorry to interrupt you, but it's kind of like the thing that gave me exposure to this idea that you're talking about of like platform ownership was Shopify. That was like the first time where I saw like where somebody can be their own sole proprietor owner of a company, or e-commerce is kind of what they specialize in. And it was like the first time where they're like, hey, like you own your own shop. You know, you don't have to use, at the time, I mean, before Shopify, people were using majority eBay, majority Amazon. Maybe there were some other like fringe, smaller e-commerce websites, but Shopify was like the one that came around and was like, nope, you do it all on your own. And it sounded like a super sweet deal at the beginning. You know, like I remember being like maybe still in university at the time, and like, oh man, this sounds like a cool idea. I want to try it. I want to, you know, open my own shop, do, you know, sell my own products, do some drop shipping, all that kind of stuff. But like, I guess I quickly came to the realization that if you don't have an audience, if you don't have a viewership, and you don't have money to spend on advertising to rent somebody's audience, it's really difficult. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people might have. And I don't know, like in your opinion, like what are some ways to counteract that? Of course, the obvious answer might be, hey, build an audience first, you know, leverage those other platforms. But maybe you can elaborate on that or expand on that a little more.
I mean, that is clearly the case and the way to go. So, and you're right. Like it became over the last 10 years or so a lot more, a lot harder to build an audience. There were like the early golden days of the Web 2.0 era, where just because you had a blog, people knew about you because there was not so many and people cared about that stuff. And now everybody is on the internet, and that means you need more to stick out. It becomes harder to stick out because there is so much. But I think, especially if we talk creators, there is still a lot of potential for organic audience build up. You just need to know what you are doing, and you need to be willing to invest the work and the time. But that is the money free way definitely still exists, and there are different things that you can do and need to do. So one, of course, you need to have a niche that you can really focus on, and that where you don't have tons of competition, and where you believe you can be the best. Like, I don't know, the best old movie analyst, for instance. I see the Fight Club poster behind you for our listeners and not watchers. So if you want to cover these, then do something that is really distinct, that is cool, and then also look who else is in the same niche, who is related to this, and then cooperate with these people who already might have some audience. These are techniques that work, but yes, it's not something that works from one day to another. So it depends on your individual timeline, and of course your budget, because the other way definitely also exists. You can and that is one of the in the good days for Shopify, because of Apple's ATT, they started ending now because Facebook is now much less performant, and it's much harder to track conversions. That's a different topic. But in the golden days of the Shopify era, how you promoted your Shopify was doing Facebook and Instagram ads to audience segments, and targeting persona types that were really likely to like your products as well, and this drove people there. And in comparison to like big old school mass media advertising methods like TV or print, it's much cheaper, much more conversion driven. And if you are more in the content business yourself, if you're creating artistic works, then most people will probably not advertise, even though if you can advertise, that is good. The second methodology for aspiring creators, people who would probably as writers nowadays be on Substack. If you don't yet have an audience, then collaborate with people and platforms that do have an audience, right? Like, I'm, for instance, a subscriber also of Casey Newton. He has the platformer Substack. He used to write for The Verge, and like regularly you will find posts on The Verge that that come from platformer, that convert people to platformer. So if you do good work, then you will find places that will be happy to have some of your content as well, and you can use this to build an audience. But I wanted to
Thomas,
get back. Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. No, well, I wanted to probe on kind of something you said near the beginning. Sorry to backtrack a little, but you touched on this idea of like in the early days, if you had a blog, you could just publish content. People will find your stuff. You might rank on Google, and now like the internet's become so saturated with content that it's so much harder to rank. But I wanted to not push back on that, but I wanted to comment on that or probe on it a little more. Um, I feel like it's come full circle where, like, as you mentioned, back in those days, you just like you went for quantity, right? You just wrote blog posts, you made sure that they were optimized for search, and you tried to rank, and you just stuffed it with SEO. Some of it sounded robotic, and that was kind of the strategy. It was very like
Yeah, but this never worked well. So none of the people who became good bloggers did this. That is.
that. That's what I'm trying to say. Like that, those were like the black hat techniques, like keyword building, keyword stuffing, guest posting, all that stuff, where it's just like push shit out there and hope people find it. And now we're seeing that, like, as technology adopts and technology becomes more smart with AI, machine learning, and Google's various algorithm changes, we see that like actual good stuff is really what'll make you grow. And that's not only in like the blog sphere, but that's in pretty much all mediums of content. And I mean, it just echoes kind of what you're saying. But like, I don't know, like what you kind of already touched on it. And just to package it a little better, like affiliation or leveraging already existing audiences is definitely one of the strategies. But like, I mean, maybe you could just finish your next point where you're going to get to. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I will keep my other point for later on, because this will bring us back full circle to your initial question. But for now, so on that note, I think even in like the earlier days, like the black hatty techniques, I think they didn't work for people to become internet celebrities like bloggers and so on. This worked in like e-commerce, for if you want to build an affiliate business and stuff. In this realm, this could work and work very well, but still, if in the end the content was more or less shitty and not really differentiated, but just with the right keywords, then you didn't build a connection around this. So it's just a different business. The one is much more commerce oriented, or sometimes even darker business models driving the commercial success then. And for bloggers, I mean, the first generation of big bloggers, they were all people who knew what they were talking about, and who built audiences based around knowledge and insights that they had, right? Whether it's like the bloggers, the media bloggers from the first generation, or others when it became more branched out into different subject areas. And now, of course, there is a lot of content in different subject areas. And of course, we long stopped talking about bloggers. Then people started YouTube, and we saw the same. People were on YouTube, and you had an audience because you did something on YouTube. And then later on, you needed to do something good, like do good cooking content. And then cooking was such a big area that now you had to do like pizza, homemade pizza and sourdough content stuff. And so you see this constant development, and then new platforms usually start in the same way. You can jump on something, and then just because you're there, you will build an audience from the people who like this and who think that is cool, which of course is one of the big opportunities that currently exist in the Web3 space. And then it matures, and then the techniques that you need to use, they change, and also different people become successful, right? It's not nowadays, just having a block is not good enough.
Thomas, I think the next question I want to ask you, kind of to move the conversation along, is like, I guess who are some of your favorite creators at the moment? Because I want to then like kind of dissect what those guys are doing right, or what those guys or gals are doing right, and see if we can kind of reverse engineer like success in a way.
Sure. Well, I mean, to be very frank, in the last years, since starting Liquiditeam, and also before this, starting a different project, my time has been somewhat limited, especially when it comes to following newer creators and discovering people. So people who know me know I'm a big NBA fan, and so there is one guy from ESPN, Zach Lowe. You see that he's on a big platform on ESPN. And then I used to be a big fan of everything Grantland, and once Bill Simmons founded The Ringer, I also follow a lot of the shows that they are doing with NBA on The Ringer. So, but that is of course already big. When it comes to individual creators, so there are actually a few folks. A lot of this happens, of course, on YouTube. There is I don't even know his name, to be frank, but the YouTube channel is called Pro Home Cooks. It's a really great channel for people who like cooking. And another guy in the biking realm, I'm just opening my YouTube and seeing who I subscribe to, and then I will give you the names. Another guy I really like is where's this bike guy? You know, I'm also biking. I'm following a bit the biking sports world, and there is this. Shit, I'm so bad with names.
Well,
Putting me on the
Thomas,
spot like this, that is really unfair.
Thomas, no, it's okay. I mean, you know Bill Simmons, and you know his content style a lot better than me, but I do know him a little, and I do know Pro Home Cooks, and I think you've chosen two examples that, in
Francis
my
Kate.
opinion,
Sorry, I need to give this shout out. Francis Kate, because he does really,
there it
really
is.
good biking stuff.
All right, well, let's focus on Bill Simmons and Pro Home Cooks, because I think they both represent two different styles, but two important ones. So, and tell me where I'm wrong. So, Bill Simmons, one of the better basketball commentators in terms of like an X's and O's guy and just essentially his knowledge of the game. But I think what separated Bill Simmons from the rest was his like his candor. It was the fact that he was willing to say whatever. He was himself. He wasn't this like media trained personality. He wasn't this like talking head, on ESPN or something. He had this like Boston kind of flair to him, and that's what attracted a lot of people to Bill Simmons. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, not on the other end of the spectrum, but kind of in the same bucket, Pro Home Cook started off Brothers Eat Green, I think, right? And it was two
Yeah.
brothers, two kind of stonery brothers making like cool, like college student budget cooking videos in their little tiny Brooklyn apartment or something like that. And they were like kind of quirky. Like one of the brothers was really quirky and kind of odd and played guitar and looked like he just smoked like or something. And then the other guy was kind of the more put together, more handled, and they kind of had this nice dynamic. And what they represented was also like speaking directly to like the everyday fan. Like you can imagine these guys in your kitchen, in your house, watching a movie, cooking some food on a college budget. So I mean, the general takeaway of both Bill Simmons and Pro Home Cooks is like relatability, right? Where you're not talking down to your audience. You're not like teaching them, you're not lecturing them on a topic or on a subject, but like, hey guys, I'm one of you. I'm a sports fan just like you. I fucking hate, when the Celtics lose just like you. Or, I'm a broke college student just like you, and I'm making home cooked meals. And I think those are two like two themes, or one theme that's I think super important from like an audience building point of view, especially in today, to stand out. I think that's one strategy that I would almost recommend any new creator, takes advantage of. Is like presenting your expertise or presenting your ideas or your opinions, not from a place of like I'm above you teaching you, but from a place of I'm one of you. I don't know. What do you think about it? Do you think that's somewhat accurate?
I think that is definitely super accurate. It takes both, right? You need to have the expertise, you need to have a distinct point of view or insights, depending also on what you do, right? Entertainment is very different from something like Pro Home Cooks. They explicitly try to teach you something. Or one guy I
Yeah.
didn't mention before, but I mentioned him really early on, is Ben Thompson from Stratechery. He does something that is, he's also individual creator, maybe the one who understood the earliest how valuable a business you can build on a truly differentiated content and having your own audience. And this way he built this one man show subscription publication that is really influential in the tech world nowadays. But also I mean, you need to be, even if it is so technical, you cannot talk down, and you need to be you need to be really clear about where you're coming from, transparent about your incentives when you publish stuff online, and you need to be honest about what you know and what you don't know. And that is like, especially in the more, let's call it the close to academic topics, people who wrote about this or who publish about this, they all do it. And you will see in writing a lot less statements that are super definitive and authoritative, and people started to be much more relativizing their own statements, because we also became aware, and now we are going really deep into almost philosophical discussions. Let's bring it back in a second, but we became aware online that all these point of views and all these different angles exist that you can have on one subject, and that is the beauty of the internet. We now have a much better understanding, all of us, of how much there is to know and how little we can actually know. and
Yeah,
and that is
but I think
something that,
people. Yeah, I mean, I think people are just honestly they got sick of traditional media. They got sick of talking heads, of media trained personalities. They got sick of like the consensus talking points, and individual creators, especially with platforms like YouTube, where it allowed like everyone to be a creator and everyone's opinion to be broadcast. And I think that's what people really want now. I mean, when you see that like Joe Rogan has a bigger viewership than like some entire media conglomerates do, and it's not just volume of viewers, but it's also like the quality of those viewers and the loyalship of those viewers. And I think that's like kind of the shift. I mean, that's like the creator economy, right? It's the fact that like fans want to hear from other fans rather than like entities, rather than corporate entities. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, that
And
it's also still going deep into philosophy, but yeah.
and look, something I don't even find it slightly embarrassing, really, but maybe it is. But I wrote a post on Medium. I just brought it up on my screen when Bill Simmons was kicked out of ESPN, and I told him, "Hey, go do your own thing." I guess he never read it, even though I tried to get it to him. Yeah, but yeah, he. So that is to say, I was really following his career from not super early on, not the days when he was still writing the Boston Sports Guy column, but the early Grantland days, and to an extent that when I hit G in my browser, usually autocomplete will always fill it with what Google, right? But in my case, it was for quite some time Grantland, and and like what you say is definitely true, and also the same thing you mentioned about pro home cooks was true, especially in the Grantland days. It felt like there was like almost this family of people who were smart, witty, who started, and Bill certainly did it, or Simmons did it, but then the other people at Grantland, they found people who wanted to combine, for instance, sports with pop culture writing, and you would see in these pieces these references to other TV shows and movies and so on, something that really didn't exist in the earlier days of sports writing, sports media, and they really leaned into this. And then they also started using these formats like podcasting early on, which of course it's the medium where you build like a relationship with the creator like no other, because they are in your ear, you listen to them all the time. And yeah, they really built something, or Simmons himself, but also the people he gathered around him, really created these universes of content, of insights that you could really escape into if you wanted to. And that is definitely one way of doing it. But we are here talking about all these cases. They are already somewhat established. I mean, at different levels. Like Pro Home Cooks is, I guess, not the Bill Simmons of cooking content, but somewhat relevant to YouTube people. And the question to me, and I guess to many people out there, is, hey, how does it work nowadays? Because the dynamics have shifted, right? It's not like Bill Simmons was one of the first people who wrote really for the internet and had his column, and that was picking up steam on the internet in a time when there was no such thing as social media. And today this has all developed in the way we described it before. And the basic truth, I guess, will always stay the same. Do something that is distinct. Do something that is made for the medium you're on, right? If you now want to be successful on TikTok, I guess you cannot just take a video that would work on YouTube and put it on TikTok. You need to do something that is really made for the format, understand this, and then build network. Of course, use social media and build followerships there. I would still recommend, don't fully rely on this. Build some ways where you can own and have direct access to your fans, and where you are not
Yeah,
reliant on a platform.
I do think, I mean, something that you already mentioned, which is like leveraging other audiences or leveraging existing audiences. I think that's one of the most powerful growth hacks. And I think, especially if your content is good, like I've personally seen, I mean, I follow fantasy football pretty closely, and I've seen people like guest appear on like a bigger fantasy network, and do some content, create a video or create an article or something, and I saw like, damn, like this person blows everyone out of the water that's at this specific publication. Like I'm gonna go follow them. Like why am I even here? Like, and I think that's like a very powerful thing, that if you can if you could, leverage somebody else's audience, understand their users and their fans, and speak directly to them in a way that they are used to, that they would like, it's really like a very underrated growth hack. It's something that I wanted to like further drive home. But yeah.
Look, some people might have heard I once started to work on a publication called attentionecono.me that I wanted to turn into a subscription publication. Then I went deeper down the blockchain rabbit hole and started Liquiditeam. So this didn't work out in that way, but I was on a good track. And just to be super specific and describe one thing that I used to do. So I was already at the time interested in things of all things blockchain, and then I picked up on Twitter a guy from Bloomberg that I'm following. He mentioned just I think in a Twitter thread, or maybe they had a little piece on Bloomberg where he opined that, well, shouldn't Facebook maybe create his own currency? That was long before Facebook actually announced Libra. And well, then what I did, because it fit nicely the theme of the publication, I wrote a longer piece about hey, if Facebook would do it, why could it work, how would it have to be? And of course I name dropped this article and the guy, and I mentioned him. Then when I shared it on Twitter, I mentioned him, and because it was up his alley, he just had thought about it himself. He was kind enough to share it on his account, and then it was even picked up in like the morning briefing from Bloomberg and the Financial Times, right? So it's these little things where if you are inspired by something, give shout outs, mention other people, and even bigger people will be nice if you do something that is really good, and spread the word about it, especially if it's like in their ballpark or up their alley. And in that sense, I feel like digital creators are very open to also doing this, if it is good, if it is not like a stupid attempt to get somebody's attention, but if it is like honest.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things that you can kind of attach to every one of those other strategies is really frequency and consistency. I mean, I know for YouTube, for example, frequency of publication is extremely important. You can have a really good content, but if you don't publish frequently and on a consistent time base, YouTube tends to not like that. And I mean, most existing platforms, their algorithms are built on the theme that how we want to keep users on the platform as long as possible. We want to keep them scrolling. We want to keep them going to the next TikTok, to the next YouTube video, to the next, and you see that with all the different like autoplay features that exist on all of those platforms, or auto scroll, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I think knowing that as a creator, it's just being reliable to the platforms where they're like, hey, this person publishes at this time, or on this day every week. We will feed that content to people, and it goes back to the idea that that's how you build an audience, right? So like, you have to leverage some of these existing platforms. It's just the world we live in, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
But yeah.
definitely leverage them. But this also goes back to these platforms have their own set of incentives, and for them they need a lot of content that brings people back and that they can usually sell advertising against, and so they also want to reward the creators who have constant output that is good enough. But that doesn't fit every creator, right? Like not everybody has this kind of output, and then he will not be rewarded but even punished by the algorithm. So that is where going back to the initial part, right? Owning your audience, having your own ways to access them, whether it's via email, whether it's with an app where you can send push notifications, that is really truly valuable nowadays, especially if you are not the kind who wants to play along in these mass output games, right? I'm personally subscribed to a few people who don't write super regular newsletters, but once one does appear in my inbox, it's a must read for me. And that is only working because at some point I discovered their work, and then it shows up at the terms of the creator and me. We have this direct contract that says send me emails whenever you publish something, and
Yeah, but
it
I
does.
think that's because you're already a fan.
Yeah,
And definitely, I think when you already have an audience, when you have loyal fans that love the work you do, then those things, none of this matters. None of these strategies matter. I mean, Joe Rogan can publish one podcast once a month, and everyone will come. In
sure,
fact, maybe more people will come. Maybe
sure.
Joe Rogan publishes too many podcasts. He does like 5 a week, and I can't watch them all. I literally don't. There aren't enough hours in the day to watch all Joe Rogan podcasts. So yeah, and I think this guy that sends you a newsletter, whenever he sends it, whenever he completes it, you're like, oh hell yeah, like let's go, I'm ready. Yeah, I
Are there
mean,
people who curate the best of Joe Rogan and then have paid newsletters where they point you to the 2 hours per week that are must watch, must listen to?
I don't know, but I know there used to be like YouTube accounts which would do like Joe Rogan clips, like best of clips. Um, and that doesn't even exist anymore. Like fan made accounts. Um, I mean, maybe they do, but I haven't seen many of them. And I think it's because of this new deal that he has with Spotify, where
Yeah, this, and then also like a
yeah,
copyright. I mean, nowadays these platforms look much more after copyright infringements and so on,
yep,
and fair. So a lot of stuff that presumably use the fair use provisions in from the US probably didn't, and then the European copyright novel from a few years ago also changed a lot of this. But yeah, that's legal stuff. So
yeah,
that is. I guess the takeaway for me when we have this discussion is there are always ways how to find audience and build audience, even organic ones, somewhere you don't have to take money into your hand, but you constantly need to adapt to the world you're living in. I mean, if once you're established, it's also a different game. But once you are, if you're an upstart, then I think a super good promising thing is to find a new platform that is getting started, and you leverage this, because like on one that is already full, it's just much harder unless you can identify a clear niche that doesn't exist this way, which also I assume is the case because there are so many topics that people are passionate about in the world, and not in every category somebody already started a YouTube account,
yeah, yeah. I
but
mean,
in many.
TikTok's a good example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, tons of people became TikTok famous, and they weren't doing anything that was very new. And TikTok is now pretty saturated. It's very difficult to find a niche that is untapped.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even though I think their discovery algorithm that is not based around followership, but also just algorithmic discovery, essentially from people you've never heard of, is still pretty good for creators. But it also created this world where you have like a lot of like one hit wonders, and that is also something that always existed on the internet, right? People went viral, but the question is, can you turn this into something sustainable? And very often the answer was no.
yeah. Do you
So
remember that guy who he was like on a skateboard with like a bottle of cranberry juice, and he was listening to like a Fleetwood Mac song?
no, I've never
Hispanic
seen that
dude.
guy.
Yeah, he's massive, complete massive viral dude. His name was like it was like face tattoo cholo cranberry skateboard man, something like that. And yeah, like not only did that song become super famous, Fleetwood Mac song become very famous, but the cranberry juice company also leveraged that. And then and then a little later on, I saw that this dude, this Hispanic guy, he like launched an NFT and like tried to sell an NFT, and then realized that like everything in that video was copyright. Like the skateboard, the cranberry juice, the song, like Yeah, it was rough. He ended up selling it like the NFT of like just his face or something, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's brutal.
it's
But
brutal.
yeah, but yeah. Hey Thomas, thank you so much for joining me, man. I mean, we're kind of just spitballing, talking about some growth hacks or growth strategies, to build an audience, whether it's direct response, whether it's brand building. I think there's a lot of strategies that can be utilized, and as you mentioned, Thomas, a lot of mediums and a lot of platforms, and just knowing what content fits for that platform. So yeah, thanks for joining me, Thomas.
Sure, it was a pleasure as always.
Yeah, if you guys like the podcast, please give it a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a like, share it with a friend if this might help a fellow creator, fellow content man or whatever. Yeah. All right, guys, take it easy.